Hello, friends. My name is Natasha Dupre. I'm the Vice President of the Guild. And if you've just joined us, welcome. And if you haven't, and you were on that last panel, it was a good one. Those are 4 people that I love to license music from. I think I've actually licensed music from all 4 of them in the last month. So great information. And we've got another one coming up soon. First, I want to thank our sponsors, Simba, Cadence, Arts and Crafts, Third Side Music, and High Priestess Publishing. Thank you very much, all 5 of you. This next panel is going to be good. It's the behind the scenes business aspect of the music licensing game. It's called It's Not All About the Playlists. Sometimes for me, it is all about the playlists. I made one last week called Sexy Sax Solos, and I can tell you there are no sexy sax solos, so don't try to make that playlist. I'm going to introduce our moderator now, Cody Partridge, who's amazing. He is the president of lead music supervisor at Pear Tree Music Supervision. He has close to a decade of experience in the industry and over 150 credits, showing his versatility in navigating music clearances and placements over all forms of media. He prides himself on being an Indiana Jones of music clearances. Hopefully you also have the whip, the duster, and the hat to go with it.
I got it all.
All right, cool.
I actually put it on with a hard search just to like get in the mood, you know?
I'd like by the end of the panel for your Indiana Jones outfit to be on. Constantly, he's finding hidden gems and never allowing rights holders to go undiscovered. In addition, and very importantly, he's also very well versed in navigating unions and when placing any affiliated recordings, assuring clients a pleasurable, worry-free experience in all aspects of authentic music use. Union rights, it's very complicated and something that's really important for everybody to remember. Some of Cody's recent credits include Letterkenny, Schitt's Creek, and Once Were Brothers, which is a Robbie Robertson and the Band documentary. Take it away, Cody.
Okay, well, hello. So as Natasha so wonderfully introduced, this is, it's not all about the playlist, sync licensing 101. So basically we're going to get into the nitty gritty of behind the scenes, not necessarily the creative side, but more of what it takes when, you know, songs are selected. Now, how do you make it happen? So before we get into that, I just want to mention about some of the charities that we'd like to kind of celebrate and donate to if possible. So sound+vision is a free virtual event. We do suggest, if possible, to make a donation to one of the 2 Canadian charities with whom we've partnered. The first is Black Youth Helpline. Black Youth Helpline is a registered charitable not-for-profit organization with a vision of productive futures for Canada's children and youth. Their mission is primarily Primarily, it's to assist with social and psychological breakdown in communities, and they want to assist with that through the focus of education, health, and community development. The second is Black Mental Health Canada. Black Mental Health Canada is a volunteer, non-for-profit, community-based organization that helps meet the mental health needs of diverse Black communities in Canada. Their mission is to facilitate access to affordable, safe, and affirming mental health services to the Black community through education and provisions of resources. Link to both charities can be found in the chat. We do recommend, if possible, $2 to $5 donation. So to start off, I'll do a quick introduction of myself, and then we'll get on to the other panelists. So as Natasha mentioned, my name is Cody Partridge, formerly of Supergroup Sonic Branding, and I've now branched off onto my own company called Pear Tree Music Supervision. Already gone over the highlights kind of what I've been working on, as well I do a bit of commercial work with TELUS, Scotiabank, etc. So that's kind of my 101. Natasha already handled that for me, so I'll hand it off to our first panelist, Tammy.
Hello. Connecting all my dots there. Hi, I'm Tammy Eagan. Bit about myself. It's been 20 years I've been working in clearances. longer than that, I start working at Rogers Cable Networks as a volunteer doing camera and film editing on a music program. So I worked for free for a long time. I started licensing visuals at Getty Images, CBC Archives, and the Canadian Press. And then I eventually moved into music licensing at CTV. And from CTV, I went on So You Think You Can Dance Canada. And when that was canceled, I went freelance, and I've been working on various projects, independent films, etc. since then. And I'm currently working in-house at Banger Films as an archive producer, working on an 8-part documentary series on pop culture and a feature film on the band Triumph. Oh, and what I'm known for is being a one-stop shop. I clear branding, music clearances, consulting on clearance issues, and pitching music, and working with live events to clear for broadcast and for online use. Hello.
Excellent. All right, and then the next we've got is Florent.
Hi guys. Hello. Thanks for having me. I'm Florent from Third Side Music. We're an independent music publisher based in Montreal and Los Angeles. I handle the sync licensing department for international and video games. So that includes a lot of advertising, TV series, trailers, movies. We're completely independently owned. We publish a large number of artists from anywhere in the world. A lot of them are Canadian, American, New Zealand, Australian, European. So there you go. Hi.
Perfect. Thank you very much. And then we got Velma. Oh, I think you're muted.
That's so unlike me to be muted.
There we go.
Can you hear me now? Hey, everybody. First, I just want to thank everybody for taking the time to log in and say hi to my buddies here, Cody, Florent, and Tammy. Hey, guys. How's it going? I guess I'm probably the oldest, longest licensing rights person, music supervisor in the business, I think on this panel at least. I've certainly been around for a long time. I started my career in music licensing, working at a major label. I started at Attic Records in 1980, so who's dating themselves now? But I have had the good fortune of working on various different sides. So for many years, I worked as director of music licensing for Sony Music Canada, and I received all of the requests from music supervisors on my desk to license all of the Sony repertoire for various different shows. And I think that gave me a little bit of an edge to slide into the position of music supervisor when the people at Sony invited me not to come back to work. So I was able to start my new position with that kind of a background and an insight, which I think really, really helped me. And I also had a lot of contacts, a lot of producers that I had worked with that had been sending me requests for many years. Were happy to say, hey, let's try and work together. So I've been very, very fortunate and very lucky over my career. What am I working on now? I'm working on an independent feature film. It's a horror film. It's called Flee the Light. And yeah, that's what else is keeping me busy. I am busy being a grandmother, which is I'm working very hard at trying to be really good at.
Awesome. Actually, to note on that too, I have a little one as well. So if you hear some crying, I apologize in advance because she's bedtime right now and she's not going down so great, but that's okay. Okay, so basically what I figure I'll start off with is kind of a brief 101, just kind of a sync for dummies, just kind of what kind of top line stuff goes into it. And then we'll kind of dive into a couple questions that I'll ask the panelists. We'll chat about it and work through some questions. So basically, brief 101 is there's two sides to every song. There's the master and the publishing. There can be multiple owners of the master, multiple owners of the publishing. The master is the actual physical version you hear, the version recorded by an artist. And then the publishing is the content of the track, the lyrics, the melody, the arrangement, etc., which also could have multiple writers. So there's multiple pieces to the pie. In addition to that, if you're working with anything utilizing a major label in North America, there's the AFM, which is the American Federation of Musicians, which is an additional fee that you would have to clear, as well as SAG-AFTRA for anything in the US, recorded in the US. And those are just additional fees on top of the master and publishing that need to be cleared. Again, just very basic 101, but I'm just going to throw out a first question. So it's, what does a music supervisor do? What roles, do you guys think, or I guess, do you want to elaborate on the kind of the role of the music supervisor in a production? So production comes to you, hey, we want to hire you on, somebody take it away. What happens?
Tammy's mouth is moving, but I
I
can't.
moved.
There you go. Okay.
Oh, it's not working.
Yes, it is. Go ahead.
Oh, is it? Sorry.
Yeah, we can hear you.
I was going to say that everybody has a unique experience because it really depends on the kind of productions that you work in. For myself, I tend to work in the factual world. And it's a lot of hand holding the producer's hand while they're having a breakdown because they can't afford a song. So what I usually do is work with the producers or the line producer, whoever's kind of overseeing the wish list. And I work through what's needed for the production, what their budget is, what they can afford or what they hope to afford. And then I pull together pitches to replace songs that I know they won't be able to afford quite often. And then I start researching the songs and getting my pitch or my request ready for the publishers and the labels for the songs. So it's kind of a basic where I start when I work with these productions.
Great. Velma, similar for you?
Yeah, similar. I think my very first starting point, and you learn this over the years, is that you're in charge of your budget, and it's up to you to get your producer to carve out what you need. And you don't necessarily accept when they first say to you, look, we've got this much money, and here's the songs that we're kind of thinking of. This is where the direction we were hoping to go to. You look at it and you think, you don't even have a quarter of the amount of money that you need. So before I start down any roads, I have the biggest, longest conversation with my producers and my directors about their budget. And exactly, like each film is different. Some films only have 5 songs, and a lot of score. And some films have, 30 cues or way more than that, as you well know. So it depends on how much music they want to use, on where your budget's going to land. But I've learned over the years not to just go, great, you're hiring me. Okay, you got this much money. Wonderful. Let's get going. Because in the end, you're kicking yourself in the behind if you haven't slowed down at the beginning and said, okay, this is what you want. This is kind of how much money we're going to have to earmark for that. You're never getting this. Right? And then on to what we can get. So I think one of my most important things is making sure that we have our budget nailed and everybody understands how much they're going to give me before I set out. I've learned that there's a lot of disappointment is avoided that way.
Yes, that's great.
Yeah.
So managing expectations, as the great David Heyman said, pump the brakes where you can. And
as the great David Heyman always said, I only got this much money, right?
Yeah. But okay, great. Yeah, no, I mean, I would agree. That's kind of the starting point is definitely the budget, because I mean, realistically, everybody has their dreams, everybody has the pie in the sky, and it all comes down to dollars and cents. So from there, we'll actually bridge over to Florent. So let's jump in to say, so like as a rights holder, for example, how do you manage, if I come to you and I'm like, hey, I'm working on this new film, they want this artist, but they have what I know is a quarter of the money that, would actually get it cleared. How do you kind of help to navigate that and assist the supervisor in kind of managing those expectations for the client?
Yeah, so I'm literally on the other side of Tammy and Velma and Cody. So I would get the brief. This is most of the time how it happens, so that you get a music search, a brief to which you respond to, and you're pitching music. But if you get a request about something you didn't necessarily pitched on. Then you're having that conversation about is the budget coherent with that artist? One thing very important is do I represent 100% of the publishing, or is there more rights holders involved, which is going to affect possibly the budget, but also the time that the music supervisor is going to spend on clearing the song. And as we know, it's usually always urgent. So if the person needs something for tomorrow, you might not want to tell them that there's 10 other publishers to contact, including majors or a weird like independent that kind of disappeared and got bought out by other people. So my job is to keep it simple for the music supervisor. So let's say if I pitched to the project, I usually have a sense of the budget that is on the table, and so I can tell this artist is going to be easy to clear, or this one might not clear, but you know, if you have more budget, we can discuss because they're big fans of the show or something like that. If I get just a walk-in request for something I didn't really generate myself and didn't sell, for lack of a better word, then you know, it's my job to tell them what they're getting into, and obviously I will do my best to make it happen. And I can also suggest replacements, see if I have something else that sounds similar that could work for the scene, but that can also work for the budget. So all that is a conversation between the supervisors and the publisher, which is always under tight deadlines. So you gotta be efficient and helpful and always nice to people.
Excellent. Yeah. I mean, you've never let me down so far. So, I mean,
Thank you.
you do a good job. So that's always nice. But yeah, no, I mean, again, kind of my 2 cents on that. Like, you know, it's very much, I totally agree with managing the budget. It's also kind of the expectations of, you know, you should get a good sense of the dream, the pie in the sky, you know, with the budget they have, what can we make happen? Can we, you know, get one of their 3 dream choices, et cetera, et cetera. We also on the supervision side need to be sure that we're well versed with rights holders in the respect of we can do the research and try to find the bulk, if not all, of who the rights holders are, because, you know, say there's 4 publishers on it and Florent is one of them, and I only know of 3 and I can't find that mystery, you know, we can work with the publishers that we're dealing with to find that missing piece. Sometimes it works out. Sometimes, you know, we just have to keep digging and you know, turning over rocks to find out who owns it. So yeah, so that's kind of, I would also put that on my kind of, where do you start? Budget's number 1, and kind of starting communications as early as you can, so you reduce the panic, the kind of the we need it in an hour approval kind of thing. So yeah, so that's definitely that question handled, I think. Okay, so let's get into this one. What are some myths that you guys want to debunk kind of right away? Like, you know, I always hear like, oh, well, if we use, you know, less than 7 seconds, it's free, or stuff like that, which I mean, isn't the case. But I mean, you can, I'm sure, get into fair use and all that too, Tammy, but what do you guys
I just had another conversation today about it with one of my projects.
There you go. All right, we'll take the floor. Go for it.
Well, fair use, fair dealing. I mean, overall, it really is a myth. There's an idea that you can use 10 seconds and you don't need to get permission. From a business side, I will say that's a myth. That is actually something from award ceremonies, where you used to be able to have 10 seconds and use it at an award ceremony without having to pay these additional fees. That really doesn't count anymore in Canada. I've had to start paying for fees for some of the awards ceremonies I've worked on. We get a break, but that's where that kind of stems from. It's an old union thing. For fair dealing, fair use, I mean, it's a big conversation and I don't want to scare anybody, but I mean, there are situations where, because it's minimal use, context of use plays into that. You can't use Kanye West just because you like the song and he said no So you're just going to use it anyway because it's fair use. But if it's, civil rights movement and they're singing the song and it's minimal use and your E&O will sign off on it, there's an argument that you can have your fair use, fair dealing, but that is not usually a music supervisor's call. You can advise, but you need to have your E&O insurance lawyer usually sign off on that. Not to scare.
Advise clear the rights. Just make it easy and clear the rights.
It is easier to clear the rights. That's what I was working on today, was advising a client that, there's more than just the master recording. You still have writers, and just because someone wrote the song doesn't mean they sang the song. So there's a lot of little elements that come into play. So it becomes really it's due diligence, and that's a big part of this job. It's research and due diligence. You can't just find one person, they say yes. You need to find like 50 people to say yes or no. Like there's a lot of work to prove that you can go ahead and do something.
Yeah,
that makes sense.
5%ers, and
yeah,
you make sure you clear
1.5%.
Not just Kanye, but all of his samples and all that jazz as well.
Well, even samples. I mean, again, with something like hip hop songs, and there's samples in it, and not even those samples can be cleared. And there's lots of law precedent. Like with Beastie Boys, that they've cleared these things, or they didn't clear them, but they were able to prove it was fair dealing or new use. But it's really complicated to reuse that in a production.
Yes. So again, samples for pitching for new media, it's always nice to avoid samples as well if you can, just because it does add that layer of complication on top of just clearing the rights, because you don't even know if they were cleared the first time around properly, really.
Well, even with new composers, not to get on this too long, but even with new composers, I mean, just because you put a Michael Jackson sample in there, I'm not going to clear it. But if you got the rights to it and properly cleared it and can prove to me, then I might license that song. I've had, people who compose music, hip hop artists, and EDM artists who are trying to license their music, and they slip a few samples in of music that's not licensed, and I make them sign away saying they've cleared everything. So if anything blows back, they have to answer some questions.
Yeah, I had a similar situation on one of the shows I was working on, and going through it. Okay, yeah, no, whatever. James Brown sample. And I was like, that's not you singing it. That's just not you. And we had to end up creating a instrumental for the use, and it was a whole thing. So anyways, Velma, any myths you can think of? I mean, you've been around.
Nothing's free, ever. Nothing is free. And the thing is that when we're licensing music or looking at licensing music, you got to remember that you're licensing something that belongs to somebody else. They own it. And it's probably more than one person owns part of it. So there's never anything that's free. You can get lost in fair use world as long as you want. You can think even choose your public domain song and say, yeah, it's public domain, it's free. Everything requires intense research. It requires that you know exactly what you're using, exactly who the rights owners are, before anybody even goes near trying to use it. That's a big mistake. Never get that far into it until you've already done these steps ahead, so that you know that you're not, walking into a brick wall.
Yes, that's very good, because there's a lot of times where, a buddy of a buddy knows a band member, but there's a good chance that, that band member may not even have a say on the master because they signed the deals away and it actually resides with the label, for example. So it's always do the diligence and go through the proper channels. I would say I would agree with you on that. And because that's kind of one of the myths that I always hear is, oh, well, my buddy, he's the bass player, we can totally clear this. And I'm like, yeah, but there's also guitarist, drummer, vocalist. They're also, all signed to the AFM. So there's those additional fees that, just because the director's best friends with the bassist doesn't mean that he gets, the police for free, you know what I mean? Right. So that's just kind of, that was an example that I dealt with, where it was like, oh yeah, I know Sting, actually, he's my cousin's sister's, best friend's whatever. And they were like, we're just going to use it 3 times. And I was like, what? They're like, yeah, we have like $100. I was like, So anyways, but that was just, again, managing expectations, back to the first thing we talked about. But it's definitely, that's one myth that I wanted to kind of touch upon, is just because you know a member doesn't mean that you can just run with it. You got to make sure that the research is done to make sure that you see it from all angles and make sure 100% of the master, 100% of the publishing, and if there's any union implications, are all covered before you even get into that point of locking picture or anything like that. Florent, anything that you want to add to kind of the myth?
Pretty much the same, like the myth that I can speak for everybody who's involved on a song, including the master and co-writers who I don't represent myself. So, I mean, I feel like all music supervisors we work with are educated and experienced enough not to ask for that, but it's more if you're working on smaller projects where there's actually no music supervisor involved and one person is somehow handling the clearance. They often assume that I can just say yes or no for the whole song, for both sides, publishing and master, which is honestly rarely the true, unless we're talking about one-stop tracks, which we also represent. But in that case, I would have pitched them. Sometimes they're lucky and the track is actually one-stop, so it's a good news that I always like to tell people, well, I can speak for 100% of publishing and master on this one, so it's your lucky day pretty much. But most of the time I have to explain that it's not how it works. And I would say the other myth is that I can do the clearance myself for them. Let's say there's 5 other publishers to clear, and the person, obviously, if there's no experience or background behind in licensing, they will assume that I can just do the clearance for them and ask my sometime competitors if they would agree to this deal, which a lot of the time, let's be honest, if the project is small and badly funded and the person is inexperienced, it's most of the time the fee on the table will be relatively low, and it's going to be harder to convince a few publishers or a big label involved. So I would say that myth of that one person can say yes for everything, that's definitely one of them.
Perfect. Yeah, I mean, definitely some hurdles I'm sure you face quite often of, people who necessarily, that was a good plug. Thanks for the plug of like hire a music supervisor. They can help do this research for you.
This is also what the guild is about, and the panels and all that. It's really to show that this is a job on its own, and you got to respect that and let the people who knows work. And sometimes it's better to just have a professional involved than just getting into it yourself and found out that you've done it the wrong way, or just to like do it the wrong way, and then you're kind of like ruining some relationships with other people, because there's a way you approach people, and music supervisors know how to do it.
What a segue, because that's going to jump right into what are hurdles that we all face on a day-to-day day-to-day kind of situation. What's something that are common hurdles that can be kind of solved if something's done in advance, or just hurdles that we know we can anticipate for a project? What's something that kind of the music supervisor or even the rights holder we can get ahead of, as opposed to having to, something that if the average, say a director or producer decided to take on this role themselves and they went to do it, what roadblocks would they hit that we can kind of foresee and overcome, but we also hit, but we now know how to navigate? If that makes sense?
I can just say from what I start, if I can get early enough on a production, is work with them on their budget. Like when they're doing a plan before, like with the line producer, we'll come up with a reasonable rate that we can start at and the kind of music that might license. But I tend to like being involved in that planning stage so that they have some understanding of what the cost, and that includes the unions, because sometimes they're like, oh, it's X per side, after I explain what per side is, And then I'm also reminding them that there's these additional fees that they don't often budget for. So I find that's my hurdle is I want to be there to help them with their budget. If not, it's, that's always becomes the biggest problem, is working through the cost, because they are shocked quite often what it might cost. And like I work in so many factual or independent production, like indie films or indie documentaries, they don't really have the budget. So they weren't thinking ahead. And that's the first budget that they nip at when they have to pay for catering or have to pay for something else. So I really try to, be upfront with any producer or director that there is a cost involved, and they shouldn't be shortcutting it if they want to have the grand songs and not just stock music.
Gotcha. So kind of be involved in the pre-production. Again, the pre-production is key. The earlier a supervisor can get involved in a project, man, does it make our lives easier and everybody else's lives easier, because you can kind of, like you said, cut things off in the past before they get too deep, before dreams become, hey, let's try to go for it. You can kind of not kill the dream, but
but kind of manage for $400.
Exactly, right? So, but at least manage their expectations, and again, help guide them through so they get the end product that they're looking for. However, it's a lot more of a cordial kind of collaborative process, as opposed to you being brought in after they've done a rough cut and they're like, oh, these are the songs we want. And then it's like, great, what budget you got? And it's either the budget could be healthy, but they're not anticipating the AFM or SAG. Also, just to note, because you did a quick shorthand, so I just want to make sure that everybody knows this. Again, going back to the very basics of music supervision, there's per side. So whenever we say per side, for example, that's referring to the master side or the publishing side. All in is the all-encompassing fee. So that would include both sides of the song, both the master and the publishing, just so everybody's back up to speed, so nobody's wondering what per side means. But yeah, okay, great. Velma, anything?
Yeah, just everything Tammy said, and also my buddy, Mike Jansen, on a previous panel had made mention of the fact that he's the replacer guy. Like, a lot of people call him and say, I need to replace this artist. Can you get me something that sounds like this or whatever? So when I heard him say that, I was like, yeah, a lot of people call me to fix things. I'm like a fixer. And some of the stuff is pretty complicated, and some of it can be very lengthy and old, and it's been festering for years, and they are called disputes. So somehow, I don't know how, but I seem to be pulled into a lot of those types of things. I don't know if they pull in the old girl that, has been there for so many of them before. I don't know, but I do get called for a lot of those. And really, nobody likes a dispute. Nobody likes it to last for a really long time. Everybody likes to find the sweet spot where everybody can get going and move on from something that is not a fun situation. But listen, we're running businesses, and things don't always go the way people want. And so it's worth bringing that up too. Sometimes we find ourselves in difficult situations. Like, I've been pulled into to fix things that other music supervisors have worked on and felt they had completed, and the producers weren't happy with that. That's an awkward spot. It's an awkward space, but we're here to look after people and make people happy and get people paid, right? So that is a bit of a hurdle that sometimes I see it coming, because it usually ends up on my desk. Are you asked to fix disputes, Cody?
Yeah, I do that. Again, me too. I'm often brought in kind of late in the game to kind of fix issues.
You completely messed this up. Can you now come and fix it?
Yes.
Right.
That's a very common thing that I'm asked to assist with. And I mean, yes, it's a headache. And I mean, we talk about getting brought in early on a project, helping things out. Then there's late, and then there's like beyond late. And that's usually actually where the music supervisor gets brought in. So, a note to everybody who's on the production side, who's watching this panel: the earlier you can engage, the earlier you can get the conversation going, the more satisfied you'll be with the product in the end, rather than us trying to come in and put out fires and doing what we can, because you may end up spending more money than you would have if we had gone for it initially and done it right from the beginning, as opposed to trying to put a Band-Aid and fix up something that was already done. Or we might be able to kind of come up with that fantastic solution for a quarter of the price that you're more than happy with. And even though you had your mindset on one track, you know, because we were there early, we could flag it as an issue or even a dispute with the rights holders, because that also happens all the time where, you know, it just doesn't add up to 100%. Maybe it's 104%, or maybe only 97% of a song is claimed.
Or they haven't even figured out the percentage between themselves.
Exactly. And that's, you know, that happens more than you'd want it to. So yeah, so I you know, that's great.
Sorry, Cody, just saying, like, coming in late too, you have to deal with the emotions going on in the production as well, which is hard because you're kind of coming in, you haven't even seen the film or the project, you know very little about it, and they're so connected to whatever piece of music is in there, and now they have to replace it, or it wasn't licensed properly, or there's some kind of problem. Now you actually have to deal with also their emotional state, which can run fairly high. And if you're kind of trying to keep business hours, you have a director who's at midnight having a meltdown because they didn't get the song they want. So we have to deal with that quite a bit as well.
Yeah, a good hurdle that is a very common thing across the music rights clearance. So Florent, anything you want to add for kind of hurdles that you see on your side of the game?
Yeah. Well, what Tammy just said is actually a great transition to my type of hurdles, because I also handle the emotional aspect from the artist perspective. So I'm not working with the production, the people making the project, but I'm representing the artist, the person who made the music. And there's a lot of emotion going there, and sometimes some ego, and you have to manage that. So one of the biggest challenge I think of my job is to kind of like, I fix problems, but probably not as much as Velma and you guys. And I would say I'm more trying to make everybody happy and satisfied. And by everybody, I mean the music supervisor and the artist. So it's a thin line between, let's say, negotiating a fee that might be too high for the music supervisor for the project, but it's actually pretty low in the artist's mind. So we have to balance that so that we don't come up as cost prohibitive, and then the music supervisor or the people working on the project say, well, we're just not going to use that song, and that artist is being difficult, so we might just not think about them for the next project or something like that. So we have to try to avoid that, but we also have to protect the value of the music and the copyright. And we don't want to set a precedent that this song or this artist can clear for that type of fee, because then it's just an open door to other deals like that. And ultimately, that's not why artists are working with us. It's actually the opposite. It's just to protect them and improve their careers and generate revenues as much as we can. So it's a thin line between pleasing everyone and so yeah. And I saw a question on the side, and just so I don't own the music myself. I'm not the right holder myself of the whole catalog we have. I work for Third Side Music, which is a music publisher. So they control a huge catalog of music, and I'm just one of the person working that catalog that I can pitch for projects and clear the music. So I'm the link between the music supervisor and the artist, the songwriters. But I don't own the music myself. That's just to clarify something I've seen on the chat.
Yeah, perfect. I mean, so you have your own kind of balancing act that you have to deal with on your side of things, similarly to how we have to. You know, you're dealing with the artist coming to us, and we're dealing with production coming to you, where we meet in the middle and we vent to each other and kind of put a, explain to everybody. That's great. Yeah, and basically to add on to your point about kind of, you working as a publisher, I find it very handy to work with people. A lot of artists don't necessarily have the, they're the artists. They're not necessarily the business side of things. So, dealing with Florent, for example, of Third Side artists, it really makes our job a lot easier, because we're dealing with somebody who, this is what they do day in, day out. as opposed to, you know, an artist who's more interested in writing the songs and going on tour and are just like, yeah, maybe we can use it. I don't know. And, you know, so that's just a note on that as well. So thanks for doing what you do. I appreciate it. Okay, so let's get on to the next section. So this one, I just kind of have a question that I kind of predetermined that was actually sent to me, but this one I'm gonna change up a little bit. So whenever we're going through a deal, what are kind of common, like, for example, I always try to license a project for all media in perp universe rights. So that's one way that I find I can help deal, or I guess whenever dealing with a budget, it's not just the budget that we have to worry about, it's also the rights that are required for the project. So I don't know if, Tammy, do you want to dive in on kind of the different deals, step deal versus all-in deals versus et cetera, that you can kind of expand a little further and kind of how you navigate with production, giving advice on which way they should go? Or
yeah, for me, again, because I work in such, you know, minimal budget productions, with factual television, indie production, like indie films, and even the live music stuff, I don't do step ups very often. It's very rare. So I'm always an all media and perp. If I can get that, I throw in some in context promo if I can get that. Like, I throw everything at it in hopes that I can clear stuff. And then as they tell me the quote, we start chipping away at what we can do with that, which is often the in context promo, because that's usually the most expensive thing for me anyway, that usually drives up the cost. And then a big thing now is like obviously Netflix and Crave, Gem for Canada, like all these now have become something I actually have to spell out more. I used to just throw in all media, but now I've been have to really define what that means. So yeah, I still go for all media as much as possible. Terms wise, I found my rates were going up, like licensing rates were going up. So I couldn't really do the in-purpose much for some of the productions for the money they had budgeted for music. So I try to do a minimum 10, 15 years if I can, somewhere there. Quite often now with older music, I'm doing life of the copyright because some of these copyrights are getting, you know, well, I know copyright law is changing right now in Canada, but I do try to throw that in the life of the copyright because some of these songs with lawsuits happening and what have you, like something like Happy Birthday, things like that. It's, you know, I push it to the limit as much as possible because I'll take whatever people will give me basically, but it's still always all media.
excellent. Perfect. Velma, what are your thoughts on kind of step deals versus?
Yeah, I think, you know, again, it depends on the budget. It depends on, each project is different, but over the years, I've done everything. Like, I've done all different kinds of things. I've done MFN with all songs in the film, you know, the same fee for certain uses, a little bit of a higher fee for visual vocals. I mean, we've tried different sort of structures. At the end of the day, you never know what's going to happen with the show once it's completed and it's sold and the distributor starts selling it. So really the best favor you can do for your producer is find a way to get all media, worldwide, perpetuity, the universe, any of those stars, like whatever you can pull in for them, you're doing the best job you can. Sometimes you can't help it. You have to do a step deal because there's just so little money, but it deserves a chance to get out there. So, you know, you kind of find a way to get it done. And even some major labels and major publishers will work with you on a step deal. If you can try to sort of,
just,
pardon me?
You want to expand
on
what
is a step deal? Okay, yeah. So a step deal would be, there's a bunch of different kinds of ways you can do it, but let's just say that you're putting out an independent film, an independent feature, and you know you're never going to be on a major network like ABC or NBC or any of those big places. You know you're going to be on a smaller distribution level, whether that's in theaters, in a small amount of theaters, or if it's going to be on a smaller broadcaster. You could go to, I have done this in the past and gone to major labels and major publishers and said, look, here's my film. It stars who's a big name, but they've come and worked on this smaller feature film. And we really want to use this song. We're going to give you as much as we have. And we know we can't get worldwide perpetuity, but we'd like to be able to get US theaters, smaller theaters, Like, do you know what I mean? Like up to maybe 200 theaters, 150 theaters in smaller places. You can narrow it down and cut it out that thinly if you have to try and get the song. At the end of the day, you can only do your best. And as Florent mentioned earlier, songs do have, they have a background, they have a past, they have a value. A song that is a big, huge, big, fat song that we know and has been around for 20 years by a big band has a much higher value than, I'm sorry, but somebody that, the guy next door just released yesterday. So value what you can get for what you've got, and you just kind of got to narrow it down. But at the end of the day, the best thing you can do for your producer is all media worldwide perpetuity.
Yes, perfect. I would totally agree with that as well. I mean, we had back when with Supergroup, it was kind of a rule, like if we couldn't get it for all media and perp, we would have to move on to the next track, just because, basically the way that I look at it is engaging in step deals from a production side of things. They're going to end up spending more money on the same song if they have to go step by step by step, as opposed to clearing it outright from the beginning. It's a bigger chunk up front. However, if you put it into steps of, again, a theatrical release, then a network release, and then home video and online streaming, well, there's 3 steps that end up totaling almost double potentially of what you could have paid up front to get all media and perp world rights. So again, that's just from my side, but from the publisher side, when people come to you with kind of that request, what is that like? What's your mindset whenever you hear is it very standard that people come to you and say, hey, we need all media and perp universe rights? Are there scenarios you can think of that you need to strip it back and say, look, no way, besides budget? Or
TV and film will most likely be all media in perpetuity. Worldwide. As Tammy said, you can exclude a few things in context promo rights, so that or out of context promo rights. Step deals. I think people have to be careful with step deals because I'm not on that side, but it requires also a lot of accounting and follow-ups, and you don't want to be trapped in a situation where you cannot actually track what the movie is earning, and you have this deal that is open, and it's you don't have the rights for more territories or more years, and you're in if you switch supervisors within the project, I feel like step deals make sense, but they are actually pretty complicated, I think, to do well. I think, but yeah, the rights for TV and film, it's everything that you said. Maybe it's interesting to mention more on the advertising side, which I know Supergroup does as well. So it's usually you'll never get in perpetuity rights for a commercial, because that's just doesn't, like, the life of a movie or the life of a series. We're still talking about something that has been made for the pure sake of creativity and fiction and entertainment. But if you're talking about an ad, you're actually selling a product that might be relevant this year, but you don't want to give them the right to use the song in 5 years, especially if your artist in 5 years has become huge. Let's say you have an indie artist, small artist, you have a commercial. Usually in Canada, it's usually a 13 weeks kind of term. So you discuss a fee for a fairly short time if you compare it to TV and film. I've seen deals for 1 day, 1 week. And the longest we will allow will probably be 1 year for a commercial. Like within 1 year, you can pick
it up.
Renew.
Yeah. You can renew if you need to, but it gives you a good window to market the product and have the song in it. But if you can have another discussion if you want to extend. And it's the same thing with territories. In the world we live in now, it makes sense that TV and film would be available worldwide. But in terms of advertising products, if you don't need this to be accessible worldwide because of the nature of the project, we try to control those aspects. And by controlling, I mean, if the budget is dictating that we're gonna control that. Of course, if the budget is huge, we're gonna allow more territories a longer term, but it all comes down to how much you can offer and how much you can get for that budget. Gotcha. And the other thing is the exclusivity, which doesn't really exist in TV and film, I guess, but in advertising, as Velma was saying about the background of a song and the value of a copyright. Some advertisers, some brands, if they have the budget, they will put an exclusivity on a song, which means that no other brands can use that song. So obviously, if you say yes to that, you need the money to be interesting enough that you're gonna say no to any other ad opportunities coming up within the term of the license, so 13 weeks or 6 months, 1 year. So those are terms that are, I'd say, more specific to advertising.
Okay, yeah, no, I mean, that's great. So basically, to kind of sum up, so for long format, which is kind of primarily what we've talked about on this panel, you too enjoy a all media imperp universe right deal as opposed to doing a step deal. It just makes things easier. Yeah. Yeah. And then, so for advertising, again, just so everybody knows, advertising is a whole different beast. And just to kind of build on what Florent was saying, you know, as he said, a TV show, movie, you know, that's made primarily for entertainment. Advertisement, you know, artists, from my understanding, or rights holders, look at it as you're attaching that artist to a brand. So an imperp, all media, worldwide deal doesn't really exist in the advertising world, because that's almost like, you know, that would cost ridiculous amounts of money, because now that artist is associated with brand. One I can think of off the top is like Feist and Apple, right? That 1, 2, 3, 4.
That's what I was thinking.
That made it like Feist is Apple. Like, I can't even try to think to pitch a Feist track for another brand, because that's Apple's artist almost, right? But it wasn't an exclusive deal or anything like that. But it's just, that's the difference of the world, because very rarely do you, I mean, besides kind of, well, at least what I'm into, 80s and 90s movies, there aren't really songs that are, you know, of films don't make the song. There's not like, that's the song from that film very much anymore. Like, we try to find those moments, but it's not as apparent as the Feist moment with Apple, for example, is my thoughts. So yeah, so let's get into kind of the last thing here. You know what? I'm going to go with the last question that I have here of touch upon kind of the pandemic. Hurdles, benefits, what have we found while trying to do this job in COVID? You know, what have we found has kind of, you know, good things, bad things? Tammy?
Well, I'd say I'm working a lot longer hours, which I always do anyway, but I was trying to give myself like a mental health break from, you know, not being able to socialize or do anything, but all it did was compound a lot more work. A lot of productions were on hold for a period of time, again, because I work in documentary. We couldn't go to the US to do interviews. We were trying to Skype interviews. It was just logistically a problem. So, you know, we were on hold, and because our schedule can't change, we might be on hold, but as soon as we got back to working at the same level that we have for the last 6 months, the schedule never changed. Delivery still at the same date, everything's the same. So now we're working longer hours to try to get delivery, because I'm working as an archive producer on one production. I'm trying to get masters, and I'm talking 8 minutes of footage from one company that's only letting their staff go in once a week to get materials. So I'm 3 weeks behind waiting for this material to come in. So I say, for me, it's been like, I'm waiting, and then the companies I'm working with also can't deliver. So it's been just a lot more stress, and it's already a stressful job. this has been a little bit more. I'd like to go back to the office, which is not something I was hoping, like thinking I would ever want to do. I don't enjoy working from home every single day. So I miss actually people in the office and stuff like that. So I feel like our job is fairly social to a point as well. So I've got Zoom fatigue. I'm over it. I miss going to see live shows. That's a big thing as well. I can't really check out new bands. I've streamed a few concerts, but it's just not the same experience. I don't get the same feeling I do to get all, you know, supervisor emo, but I don't get the same feeling I get when I'm at a concert and I see the crowd reacting to the music as well.
Yeah.
So that's been my experience. A lot of stress and long hours.
Sure. Velma?
You know, yes, a lot of things have slowed down. That's the truth. You know, many of us are working. We're lucky. We have some work happening. But let's be honest, most shows shut down. Most shows shuttered. Anything that was starting up didn't get off the ground. I have 2 shows that didn't reach past their funding, which was unfortunate. And, you know, we should talk about that a little bit because it does happen. We're not always blessed with all these shows that fall in our laps. You know, it does happen. Producers work very, very hard on their projects. They get them in for funding. They absolutely have every single, you know, thing ticked off. They've got great talent, great director, great producing. And then all of a sudden the funding just doesn't come together for one reason or another, which means we don't work. So throughout COVID, 2 of the projects that I was working on that I spent quite a bit of time on actually did not happen. And that's okay. You know, that happens. That's just the way it is. Many times as music supervisors, we do have to work on stuff, you know, ahead of actually getting signed on and getting a contract and, you know, moving forward with actually being the music supervisor on the show. That happens all the time. So, yeah, it's affected all of us, this COVID thing, to be sure. But if anything I've learned throughout this is how wonderful it is to have this group of music supervisors in this guild. We are definitely stronger together than we would ever be by ourselves. And the fact that we have been able to put this together, and I've had nothing to do with it, I'm just here, but you know, Michael Perlmutter, Natasha Dupree, Dondria, and the rest of you, you have done an amazing, amazing job at showing our peers and all of our friends how powerful and how good we can be together, and that we can do things that matter and make change. And I'm very, very, very happy about the people that we're trying to help and make donations towards today, which is Black Mental Health and the Black Youth Helpline. Please, if you have even a small amount of money, donate to them. It's a good thing. So thanks very much.
Awesome. And Florent, you want to wrap us up here and we'll get into questions?
Yeah. I mean, same as Tammy and Velma, we've seen a drop in the volume of requests and briefs from TV and film, which obviously makes sense with people not being able to shoot a project, or even just people cannot go to theaters to see the project. So I think it's going to be a lot of adaptation for the coming years. I think the biggest challenge is it's the unknown, that what we're going through and how things will change and when. I would say the positive side, if I can say, would be that because everybody's working from home and slightly less busy than before, there's a bit more time for connecting with people. So I would assume that people have more time to listen to music, to discover new artists, to just catch up with each other. I've been talking to a lot of people on Zoom that I cannot see in Europe or in the UK, and I felt that maybe before I would have maybe like a 20 minutes chat, like kind of very tight, and now I can spend an hour with someone because there's more time for that. And also on our ends, I mean, on the publishing end, just to more time for research as well, researching who's working on what, who's working where, what's what's going on in the world. And I think it's there's a lot of stuff happening in every country in the world, and the situation is going to change differently country by country, pretty much. I mean, the way it's happening right now. So it gives us more time to reflect on what we do, and so, I mean, personally, I love working from home, but I understand the challenges that come with that. And as doing international, I used to travel all the time. I would spend a few weeks in London, in Paris. I would go to our Los Angeles office, and now it's just none of that. So it's definitely a different life this year, but I think we'll make through it.
Perfect. Great. Well, thanks, guys. Okay, so let's dive into some questions. So one I have here, the question is, could you give a ballpark idea of how much music is priced for syncing? For example, is it based on the artist's clout? What are the factors at play? Do you want to start with this one, Florent?
Yeah, sure. I don't think there's any set fees. You know, it's that's something there's no grid of fees per se. We approach things in a way that the budget of the project will dictate the fee pretty much. So then it's up to us to see if we can clear a song or not. And in some cases we can be flexible. In other, there's also there's a lot of factors. The requested rights that we've discussed earlier is one of the main factor for discussing a fee. Does the fee reflect the rights you're getting? So it's it's pretty open.
It's kind of a case by case basis. It's not really a,
and if there's some sort of a coherence between the music of the project, obviously, as a publisher, you don't want to have your artist who's gonna get the smallest fee of the project when other publishers and other artists are getting bigger fees, But if you tell me that this is pretty much the average fee for every music in the project, then it's already a bit more convincing, because then we have to talk to the artist and explain them why this fee is the way it is.
Great. No, that's great. We'll jump to the next question. I like this one. When can public domain possibly cause a problem?
Every
Tammy?
day of your life.
Every day. Anyways,
Every day.
So who wants to field this one? Because clearly we all have an opinion on it.
I mean, public domain. There are other things to consider. I'm thinking audio visual when I think of like a live performance, because that's usually what people go for when they think public domain to put on YouTube. You still have to look at who's performing, because there's still rights for the performer. So we're talking things before 1924. So it's not 1960, it's before 1924. And there are sites that have like listed public domain. That's why we talk about Christmas music this time of year. I'm putting together my Christmas tunes for a project for public domain for a choir to sing. It's not as simple, I saw it, it's public domain. You have to do some research. You have to figure out when it was actually released, look at copyright law, and double check that no one has extended that copyright.
Yes, and don't just trust like pdinfo.com, because
no, but there are I just off the top of my head, I can't think of the university, but there is a public domain fighters of the cause in the US, and they January 1st is like PD Day, and it's every year that the new material that comes out is public domain. They post on the website, but it's a bunch of wannabe lawyers who have researched it and have published it, and they have music, books, films, etc. But to bring up a film example, It's a Wonderful Life. You can't play the music. The music's not public domain. The clip is the movie's public domain, but the music's not public domain. So people confuse that constantly, where they think public domain encompasses the entire, say, audio visual, when it's not true. Again, we're back to like doing some basic diligent research.
Perfect. That's a great answer. It's all about the research with public domain, because yeah, that's what I've found is it's one of those myths that a lot of tracks are public domain when really they're not. Let's see, what's the next question here?
Can I just add one thing to that,
Yeah,
Cody, quickly about public domain? Public domain is different in every country, pretty much. So when you say, what do you mean it's not public domain? It's like, well, where are you releasing it? If you're releasing it in Canada only, ever in your whole life, then okay. If it's public domain in Canada and you can, ensure that it is, you've done your research, that's fine. That's why you need a music supervisor. They know how to do the research. Yeah. Public domain is different in every country, almost. Like I've just pulled up something here because my brain doesn't remember these things anymore. Australia, 70 years from publication of the last sound recording.
We're going to be 70 years. We're going to be
50 years after making it for television broadcasts. 25, like you need to do your research if you try to do it by yourself. Otherwise, hire a professional and we'll be able to get as close to real for you as possible.
And a big thing too, again, not to bring up fair use, fair dealing, but that is not recognized internationally. So every country looks at that differently. So, you're not going to spend all this time looking at every copyright law throughout the world because it's, mind numbing. But, that's why you have E&O. That's why you have lawyers, because they really will be the one to make that final call with the research you provide to them, basically. But yeah. Good point, Velma.
Okay, so I got two questions left. So one will be, somebody asked, who would you suggest for registering with for royalties to collect royalties for them? Is like SOCAN.
SOCAN, yay SOCAN.
Yeah, is the one, right? Yeah, because I saw like Sound Exchange or Connect but I mean, to me, SOCAN, ASCAP, BMI, those are kind of, for me, the ones that I would suggest.
Yeah.
You can register for more than, I think you can register for Sound Exchange and SOCAN. SOCAN SOCAN is your your performance rights side. But I think the other ones help you collect royalties in different places.
Okay.
And
it's not really, I'm not too versed in that, so that's what I'm handling.
Fascinating. There's all kinds of way to make money out there, guys. You just need to do your research.
Perfect. Exactly. That's the number one thing you got to take away from this. Research is key in every facet. Last question, and it's just kind of a broad one that I'm surprised only one person asked, but I'm sure everybody's wondering it. Advice for getting into music supervision. Any advice?
Well, it's a little different these days. I mean, every university and college has some kind of music course, like music business, course. I actually took some classes at George Brown to understand royalties better. So I find today it's a lot more people want to do it, not really fully understanding yet what that job entails. But a lot of universities and colleges, especially in North America, have some kind of course about music and the music of business, the business of music. So for me, anyone who asks me now, I say, take a couple courses so you understand what you're actually looking to do. Internships. I started off in journalism. That's my background. I worked in news. I used to do on-air reporting, stuff like that. Got stage fright, and then to start working behind the scenes more in research. And, it was a long process to get where I am today. But, a lot of labels are looking for admin help, publishers, admin help. Even the pro societies, or CMRA, like any of that kind of stuff, I find that would be a good spot for someone to understand some of the elements of the business. And it means starting at the bottom to actually learn, because I don't really get royalties still. I
had a good call with SOCAN the other day, and I'm still kind of like, okay, kinda, but
yeah, it's like, man. But I would say anyone who wants to really delve into this career, really understand all these facets now, because you're being asked more and more. Like I started doing performance rights licenses, which is not something I would use. Like that's a line producer would usually take care of that, or the producer would take care of it. And the last couple of live things I did, I had to go to ASCAP and BMI and, get licenses for like the NHL live events. So basically I had to get their license or confirm the teams had their own licenses because they didn't even know that that was a step they had to take. So they asked me to like, here, take care of that for me, please. And so that was my introduction to that.
So, I mean, yeah, to build off of that, what I would suggest is, start at the bottom. I mean, we all did. And really, to me, now that I've been doing it, like I said, for close to a decade, it's kind of experience to be trusted to do this research. And that you have to learn from the beginning, and you have to like, there's no fast track. You got to learn. You got to go through projects. You got to start small with student films and, find your buddy's band and learn the process, and then build from there and build from there and build from there until you get the experience under your belt. It's one of those careers that I don't think you can just jump in and take on a feature film and do it properly, because there's so much legality and so much research that needs to go into things. So if you want to get into it, I would agree, start with, if you can get an admin position at a label or a publisher or CMRA or SOCAN or any of the performing rights organizations, start on that side and kind of bridge into, intern or work with a music supervisor as a junior. You may be starting just doing cue sheets, but they're very important. And that's kind of like, you start with the cue sheets, then you get a license here and there. So it's kind of it's not a quick process. It's going to take a bit to actually become a supervisor. Velma, do you have anything to add?
Only that anytime I've done any work with you, Cody, you've blown me away with how efficient you are and how like amazing you are with the details. Like, dude, you just got it.
I appreciate it.
And that's something that you can't learn. You either have it or you don't, you have that desire to get it done and get it done right the first time and do it quickly. And Cody, man, I would hire you. If I was a producer, I'd hire you today.
Got the plug there. Pear Tree Music Supervision. No, but
there you go. Right there's your proof for me.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate that. But
no problem. It's well earned. Yeah.
Do you have anything to add about kind of how to get into even this world, even the publisher side of things?
Oh yeah, I was about to say that sometimes it's interesting to start on the other side of things, because from what I understand, it's the music supervision world is pretty hard to get into, because most of the time you're on your own or in a small team, and you're competing with a lot of other people, and you got to fight for your projects and get the relationships to get the good music and learn from what you do. So I mean, myself, I've always been interested in being on the music supervision side, and I was almost thinking about doing the move about a few years ago, because I wasn't sure about what I was doing on the publishing side. So if any job you can find in music at a label that has a sync arm, or a publisher, you can learn the job from a different perspective. And if you manage to actually get into music supervision, everything that you've learned, and not even just knowledge, but connections, everyone you've met as a music publisher can be very useful to you as a music supervisor in the long run. So there's a lot of ways to start in this industry, I think.
Great.
Word of mouth, sorry, just saying, like, word of mouth is a big way we get jobs. I would assume you guys the same. You work for one production, one producer likes you, goes to another company, they're calling you to come in and help them because they, can't explain, how to clear something, but they remembered you do. So they'll call you and ask you to come in and meet with the production staff. I've done that a few times for free, not so much anymore, but, that's primarily, I can say every job I got this year, or the last 2 years, has been word of mouth. My resume is like from 2017. It's like I don't update anything just because I'm always working. I turn over my job and I'm already on the next one. So, word of mouth.
Perfect. So sorry to wrap things up, but we got to move on because we have another panel coming up. So thank you everybody for listening. I hope that we, helped to show that music supervision isn't just, hey, I love this song, it's in a film. It's a little bit more research, a little bit more goes into it. Thank you again for watching, being a part of this. If you do have a moment to donate to Black Youth Helpline and Black Mental Health Canada, please do so. So next up, it's a workshop called Compose This, exploring how composers approach writing to picture, and it's moderated by the wonderful Jody Claro. So it's going to be a really cool one. They're going to take a scene, do a whole thing with it. Stay tuned. It's going to be really good. So thank you very much. And thank you to the panelists.
Thanks.
Thanks, everybody. Stay safe.
Bye.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Cody.